Welcome to the Ringers 2021 NBA mock draft. I'm Kevin O'Connor, and here today to participate with me in this mock is Jonathan Tjarks and J. Kyle Mann. So just some rules for how we're going to conduct this first round. No trades are allowed. We're keeping this simple here, though there will be trades on draft night. We're only doing the first round, and we're going to alternate picks in this order. Kyle, then Tjarks, and then me. And also, The Ringer has an NBA draft guide with scouting profiles of the prospects we'll discuss. So if you want to check that out and follow along while listening or watching, head to nbadraft.theringer.com to find The Ringer's 2021 NBA draft guide. So let's get this rolling, starting with the number one pick, the Detroit Pistons, and J. Kyle Mann. You are on the clock.
Can I use the whole 5 minutes and just sit here in silence? And no, I'm kidding. No mystery here. If you've interacted with me in terms of the draft in the last couple years, you know that I like this player a lot. I'm not going to overthink this. I think that the Detroit Pistons, based on their needs, based on the personnel that they have in their future, I think that they should take the only legitimate three-level scorer, pick-and-roll player in this draft, and that is Cade Cunningham from Oklahoma State. I think that he is the pick there for them.
I mean, I think Cade, Kyle, Cade's the number one in people's boards for 3 or 4 years now. I just wonder, did we crown him so far in advance there was no room to talk about anybody else?
I think there's been a lot of discussion. I mean, I know that you were early in your Tjarksian way. That's a word I'm going to coin right now. About this is all good. This is all good scientific debate. We need, if positives don't have negatives, we're no charge. The quote from the master there. I think it's important. I think that Cade is the only guy. I made up something recently called the pick and roll pyramid, and there are different guys that can score and flip the gravity. I think that Cade is the only guy that's doing that at this point. I don't know. KFC, what do you think in terms of, I think defensive upside is high too for Cade.
I mean, I think Cade isn't necessarily a quote unquote no-brainer number one like we've seen in past years this decade, but Cade, there's a chance he could be the best shooter in the draft. There's a chance he could be the best passer, the best pick and roll playmaker. There's a chance he's the best go-to scorer. There's a chance he's the most versatile defender. At 6'8", with his vision, his work ethic, his scoring ability, I mean, this guy checks all the boxes that you could look for in a number one pick. So for the Pistons here, so any fit issues with how you're building this thing out with Killian Hayes already at guard, you get Sadiq Bey at wing, Isaiah Stewart in the front court. You're not thinking about fit here necessarily. You're thinking about who is the best possible player you can select in the draft. And that is Cade Cunningham. With that said, though, Tjarks, you did allude to it. Is there logic to looking elsewhere? And that should lead to number 2 here with the Houston Rockets on the clock and your selection.
I gotta say also, do you hear the knife in Killian Hayes is back after KOC spent all last year how he's gonna be a superstar? And I was like, fit, get this man out of here. I don't care. But
hey, I guess they can play together, Tjarks. They can play together.
They could, okay, totally. It's not a betrayal.
Oh yeah.
So with the Rockets at 2, I've always been an Evan Mobley guy. I've been a little surprised, honestly, how much talk there has been about Jalen Green. To me, I think Mobley is clearly better than Green, and it's more about Mobley versus Cade. But I would think if you follow kind of the discussion of the draft, it's mostly been Mobley versus Green at 2. But if I'm Houston, I have to take Mobley at 2. I think him and Cade are by far the best 2 players in this draft. Those are 2 guys who could be franchise players, who can elevate the team on both ends of the floor. I think Mobley's just scratched his potential. He's an 18, 19-year-old 7-footer with all the skills in the world. I think this guy is an absolute superstar. And if he goes beyond 2, I'd be shocked.
Tjarks, you mentioned all the skills in the world. What are those skills that Evan Mobley has that could make him the best player in the draft?
I would say it's this. He's the rare 7-footer who can be a triple-double threat and a defensive player of the year kind of talent. That's just rare to have elite passing and elite defense in a 7-footer.
Kyle, Tjarks had mentioned how a lot of people talk about Jalen Green at the selection here. Is there any logic to selecting Jalen Green here over Evan Mobley? Is there anything that makes sense there for them to do that or to consider a trade down?
To me, I think that this is, I'm with Tjarks. I think that this is pretty cut and dry, straightforward. I think that the upside on both ends is so high. I think that there's some conditional things about Jalen Green. I know that we've kind of in this ebb and flow of the draft discussion that we typically get, every single year we do this double back thing where we're like, are we absolutely sure? I personally value what Mobley, we've seen the value of, like, say, DeAndre Ayton in these playoffs, these guys that can provide positional, like elite positional defense and rim protection, can move on the perimeter defensively and then also not hurt you on the offensive end. There's not this like give and take thing where you're going to get hurt by the trade-off. I personally think that it's Mobley over Green pretty clearly. I think that the Green Suggs thing is more of a debate personally, because I think that Cade and Mobley are a clear tier ahead of the next group.
So we'll move on to that next group here with the third pick in the Cleveland Cavaliers. I am taking one of those guys, Jalen Green, going to go with him out of the G League with the third pick. He's 6'5", 180 pounds, averaged about 18 points per game in the G League and got pretty good throughout the season in terms of his decision-making, his passing, his shot selection. I thought by the end of his stint with the G League, he looked like a more seasoned player. But, for him, it's his Levine-esque leaping ability that has him as a top pick in the draft and his potential shot creation ability. And a lot of people around the league consider him maybe the highest upside player in the draft because of his elite athleticism, because of his scoring ability. And that's why he's the pick here for Cleveland. But Tjarks, the Cavs are in a tough spot here if Mobley isn't available because, Mobley's the perfect fit. He's really can fit anywhere. But with Cleveland, they already have Colin Sexton and Darius Garland, two young guards on the roster. But the best players available here are two guards, Jalen Green and Jalen Suggs out of Gonzaga. So I'm curious, Tjarks, assuming Mobley is off the board, how should the Cavaliers be approaching this selection at number 3? Should it be thinking trade? Is it just going with the BPA, the best player available? What do you think Cleveland should be thinking about here?
I think that's why you're seeing so much Colin Sexton trade talk, because of where he landed in the lottery, because it's just not realistic to have Green, Sexton, and Garland together, I don't think. I think if you have that many guards who need the ball and are going to struggle on defense, it's just kind of like oil and water. So they'll have to make a trade if they stick with the guy here.
How about you, Kyle? What do you think?
Here's the thing that I want to say up top, and this is general kind of like draft philosophy. Unless you're one of these teams like, the Spurs in 99 where you just have a down year, or like the Warriors this year where you have a down year and you somehow miraculously get a high pick. Fit is a thing. Like, think about what the idea of fit implies, that you are working with something that already works. Like, you're trying to adjust to that. And for me, the Cavs, there's nothing on that roster to me that I am so in love with. I never liked the Garland Sexton thing from the beginning. So
not a Sexland fan, Kyle.
I mean, it's fun on some level, but
it's got a great name. It's a great name.
The branding's incredible.
Yeah, great branding.
As a former ad guy, for sure. I'm in love with that.
Kyle's more land than sex, I think, if we're talking about it.
I don't even know. I'm not even going to touch that. Anyway, wow.
Moving on to Kyle's pick at number 4 with the Toronto Raptors.
Anyway, I don't think that there's any. Pick the best player if you're not fitting with something that makes a whole lot of sense. Anyway, so all right, next up, my pick is, I think that the Toronto Raptors at number 4 should take Jalen Suggs from Gonzaga University. Jalen Suggs, the quick rundown, in my opinion, this guy is, he's been like a point guard quarterback type his whole life. He's cerebral. He is really tough. He loves contact. He loves to attack the basket. He's a gamer. He's a big moment guy. I think that he has a lot of potential as a dribble pull-up shooter. He's a guy that's going to be able to provide you value on both sides of the ball. And I just like his moxie and his personality a whole lot.
Kyle, you say fit, doesn't necessarily matter if you don't have anything to build with necessarily. For Toronto, though, they are a team that before this season, when they play the entire year in Tampa Bay, Florida, that they were a team in the playoff race that had finals hopes. Is Jalen Suggs the type of prospect, regardless of what happens with Kyle Lowry, the type of guy who can make an impact right away, help them continue winning with OG Anunoby, Pascal Siakam, Fred VanVleet, all these guys? How does he fit, though, with this existing good group in Toronto?
I think he fits great. I think that core that you were talking about, we had this conversation the other day, and Tjarks said throw in Gary Trent Jr. too. I think this works. This is a physical group that has skill players in it. I think you could, Chris Boucher, you could include him in there too. I think that Suggs is going to interface quickly with the NBA game, in my opinion. Do you all agree with that? How quickly do you think he'll be ready to play?
He's an instant impact guy for sure because he can defend right away and he's a smart player. He's going to be able to find a role for himself, especially in Toronto where there's a lot of shooting around him too. It's a great, great fit, I think.
So, Tjarks, after the top four of the draft, this is where things start to get fuzzy. There's a lot of disagreement on who that next best prospect is. Kyle went with Suggs at number 4, but there are other guys that will be in consideration here in this next group. Who are these prospects that teams are going to be thinking about starting at number 5? Who do you like the most, and who will be your pick at number 5 for the Orlando Magic?
Yeah, I think any of the top 4 guys, I'd be kind of shocked if they didn't make it. Like those guys are all they're all great prospects, but Orlando at 5, that's where you kind of said, like all the guys in this range, I think most of the discussion has been about these big wings. So you have Jonathan Kuminga, the other G League Ignite guy, Scotty Barnes from Florida State, Jalen Johnson from Duke, Franz Wagner from Michigan. They're probably the big ones. And there's at the guards, there's James Bouknight at UConn and Davion Mitchell. I'm a big Bouknight guy. I think he's probably the safest pick in that range. I think he's going to be a big time scorer in the NBA. My guess is with Orlando, given their track record, they're going to draft like the biggest, most athletic, longest wing and hope they can teach him how to shoot. It hasn't worked before, but that's what they do. So I'll go ahead and put Kuminga here at number 5.
Kyle, is this a smart pick for Orlando?
I mean, I in my notes, I just wrote big bruising forward who has questions of feel and areas for growth in terms of his ball skills. I mean, if you watch Kuminga, when it looks good, your eyebrows raise, but it's one of those, it's very feast or famine. When it looks bad, it looks like, is this a robot that just like went off of his software for a moment that like is trying to play basketball? Like, it for their situation where I think that they need to just continue to build and accrue skill players. They need to get ball skills, shooting. They need to get fluidity offensively because they've been bad. We talked about this in Ringer NBA University show a lot. They've been bad offensively for the last few years. It makes no sense, which is probably why they're going to take Jonathan Kuminga. I mean, he does things that wow you, but I just feel queasy in my stomach about Kuminga at this point. Could
Kyle,
live to regret that.
You call him a robot who could be off of his software because of some of the poor decision making that he has. I'm going to play the role here of Magic General Manager Jeff Weltman for a second. Are we sure Kuminga isn't being underrated here? He's just a teenager, Kyle. 6'8", strong, frame of a star. He's flashed elite defense. He's versatile. He can defend bigger guys. He's quick on offense. He's shown the ability to create off the dribble. When his shot is on, this dude, it's hard to stop. And we, the Orlando Magic, view him as somebody who could be the best player in the draft. Why should I not feel that way, Kyle?
Can I throw that to Tjarks? I feel like Tjarks, you defend the pick. You made it. Why do I have to defend?
So I'll say with Kuminga, kind of what KOC was saying, Kuminga's a guy who's always been the biggest, most athletic player on the floor. And you kind of saw on the Ignite team, that didn't work for him anymore. That was the first time in his life where it wasn't enough about his physical tools. And that might have been the wake-up call he needed to improve his game. He is really young. He reclassified a year ahead to get to this point. So you got to think like realistically, what would you expect was going to happen in the G League, given that this is a really young player who's pretty raw and depends on his physical tools? Like he's going to struggle. That's not that big a surprise, really.
So teams are going to have to ask themselves here, what level of risk are they willing to take on? The upside with Kuminga, it's significant, as you guys discussed. The downside is also pretty significant as well if you whiff on that pick. So teams are going to have to value risk and upside versus a level of certainty. And that brings us to the number 6 pick with the Oklahoma City Thunder. And I'm taking Scotty Barnes here out of Florida State. We mentioned him in passing earlier, a 6'7" forward with the potential to be an elite defender. He can switch positions. He has size and strength. He has agility. He's a selfless player. I love the fact he's selfless, and I would be willing to bet as a rookie, the local announcing crew, the local media crew is going to be comparing him to Draymond Green because of his ability with his size to run an offense for you. He played a lot of point guard at Florida State. He can handle, he can finish inside. And I honestly think, we talked about how Suggs and Green are likely the next 2 guys after Cunningham and Mobley. I think Barnes at least deserves consideration as high as number 3. Not that he should be the pick, but he at least deserves to be in consideration there. So for Oklahoma City here, I love the fit next to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I think he can help him run the offense in a multi-ball handler offense while stabilizing the defense. It wouldn't shock me one bit if Barnes is one of those guys who's really good right away.
Okay, so you're bearing the lead. What's the fit with Poku? This is Poku's franchise.
Yeah. We're keeping Poku happy so that we can keep him in Oklahoma City. That's what it's all about because, he's an all-NBA player probably next year, I would imagine.
Of course. We'll be talking Hall of Fame there, Kyle, for Poku.
Yeah, he's first ballot for sure. Is there something sooner than first ballot? Is there automatic that we could get that worked out? I was going to say, me being, I'm really into oversized big hands. I think they're important. And I started something a while back called the Committee for Oversized Hands. I just wanted to throw this out there that Scotty Barnes has 10 and a quarter inch hands in terms of his width and 9.25 long. So big hands, unselfish player, defends his butt off. You want to say something, Tjarks? You look like you.
I was just gonna say one comp will also get for Draymond Green because he can't shoot. So that's another reason for the Draymond comp.
I don't think he's in as bad a spot as Draymond. I think if you look at the starting point, if you look at who he is in terms of like the other areas of his game and I don't think that it's impossible. I mean, we got to the point in like 2016, 17 where Draymond was like making open threes, like at a reasonable enough clip for the things that he gives you. And I think that Barnes could do that.
Let's move on to the 7th pick. Kyle, you are picking for the Golden State Warriors, their first of 2 first-round picks.
So, yes, here at the 7th pick, I think that the Warriors are going to need to pick somebody that is ready to go now. I think that they need somebody that can be a good decision maker on offense, hit open shots, facilitate some, like create off the bounce, get to the rim, create fouls. I think that Davion Mitchell would be a good pick for them. The Warriors are in a position where they need to maximize the window that they have in front of them here. They're not like a really long developmental track situation. Mitchell's a guy who is defends like a dog. Like he's a player who is. I'm not one of these people that overrates big game situations, but he's really poised. We've seen that, and he has a killer instinct that I like a lot. Great athlete.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate here. First, I just want to say I like Mitchell personally, but playing devil's advocate, is there any part of you, Tjarks, that's like, why is a 6 foot flat guard who's only had one great college season and made 66% of his free throws being drafted in the 7th pick? Is there any part of you that is like, maybe we're making a mistake here and overreacting to one great junior season?
I thought you were going to say, why are you drafting a 6 foot guard with Steph? Because that definitely concerns me. Like, I think if you're Golden State, your whole thing all these years was Steph with big wings. Now you're playing 2 small guards together. It only really fits their system at all.
No, I mean, we're picking hypothetically here. Me, philosophically, we had this conversation the other night. I don't know about reaching. This isn't necessarily a big board situation for sure. And it also doesn't imply that he has to play because we saw that the on-off situation, when Draymond and Steph are off the floor, they need more competency throughout their rotation in terms of production. And I think that we saw that it just falls off of a cliff. That's one argument for it. I mean, are you going to be able to, on the free agent market this summer, sign somebody that gives you immediate contribution like that? I agree. Big wings make a lot of sense here. I'm not sure who they would reach for instead, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you guys on the front of he is small. I mean, and he's older. So those are question marks for him.
Mitchell's one of those guys that's easy to get going talking yourself out of him, but the flashes of what he showed this year at Baylor, the shot creation ability, the toughness on defense, that's like you said, Kyle, think about what the Warriors were missing. It's that guy who can help support the offense when Steph is off the floor. Like you could play him with Clay. He doesn't need to play a ton with Steph Curry. I love what he potentially could provide at 6 feet. There's going to be some limitations, but I'm a big fan of Mitchell, and I'm not gonna talk myself out of having him ranked in my top 10. But there is another guy like James Bouknight. He could make some sense too. Franz Wagner, and if you did want to go with a wing there's other options available. Let's move on to number 8 with the Orlando Magic. Tjarks, you're up.
So I'm gonna take James Bouknight. I talked about him earlier. Ooh. I think if you're Orlando, this is the best case scenario because I think they could take him at 5 if they wanted to, really. But my guess would be they want to gamble on a bigger player at 5 and hope Bouknight slides to 8. He's just a pure scorer. He actually plays a lot like Jalen Green. I think he'd be the best scorer in Orlando in a long time. This is a guy who could probably get 15, 20 points in 1 or 2 years easily at the NBA level.
The number one concern about Bouknight was his jump shot, and he shot well at the NBA draft combine and pre-draft video. The shot looks good. Kyle, how much does what we've seen pre-draft change your evaluation of Bouknight as a prospect?
I don't really put a whole lot of stock into what happens in workouts and I want to see the tape. I want to see a diverse sample and watch them in a lot of different situations, because shooting within game rhythm and things like that is just totally different than shooting in workouts. We've seen, I know like a couple years ago, like people went wild over Grant Williams shooting threes. Willie Cauley-Stein hit a bunch of threes. These guys are good players. You should be able to shoot well in workouts. Like even guys that perceivably can't shoot well, you get them in workouts and they're going to hit shots. So no, that doesn't sway me a whole lot. That doesn't even come anywhere close to me. What I'd be looking for is like maybe mechanical issues. Do we feel like there was a mechanical shift that would make me feel better? That's what I'm just saying hypothetically for any player, not necessarily Bouknight. But no, it doesn't move me a whole lot, honestly.
I would say for Bouknight's a career 80% free throw shooter. I think the shot looks fine. And I would say the 3 guys taken above him, I'd worry a lot more about their shot than Bouknight's.
And those 3 guys ahead of him would be Davion Mitchell, who had one great season shooting threes, Scotty Barnes, iffy touch, iffy from the line, and Jonathan Kuminga, who is just flat out a theoretical shooter. There's a number of those guys. So moving on to the 9th pick here with the Sacramento Kings, I'm taking a guy I do feel some level of confidence here. With Franz Wagner, a 19-year-old forward who's 6'9", Michigan sophomore who led them deeper into the tournament. Excellent scorer with, I love his defensive awareness. This guy just knows where to be, when to be there. On offense, he can pass. He can run some offense for you with his size. He can score in a variety of ways. And for number 9 here for Sacramento, I think there's a bit of, you mentioned fit earlier, Kyle. I'm drafting a little bit for fit here because you already have De'Aaron Fox and Tyrese Halliburton. You feel good about what you have there. Wagner can provide some playmaking with size for you. And I think at worst, Wagner is going to be a good role player. At best, that's where I wonder what level he could be. So Kyle, I am curious, like what is the upside here for Franz Wagner? Or am I just making a mistake here drafting a guy who likely could be a really good role player?
I think the upside is like higher up, like above average starter. I don't know that I necessarily believe that's going to happen. I think
should he be top 10 pick then? If the upside is above average starter, should he be top 10?
That gets into sort of philosophy of draft. Honestly, that's a bigger conversation for me. And this is sort of the push and pull of the draft that gets hard every year, is that we get this conventional wisdom of like, this is who you should take here versus like, what are our needs now? I was kind of wondering, is Fox even going to be there? We've seen more and more mention of that. The only things that really make sense in Sacramento are Halliburton, Fox, and I guess you could say Rashawn Holmes is a guy that I like a lot. I don't know how much they're going to work to keep him there, but yeah, to me, his upside is like above average role player. I kind of see it kind of falling somewhere in the middle. I know that's sort of a cop-out pun on the question, but I'm not totally convinced that's going to happen. To me, he seems like somewhere lower than that. I'm not as sold on his upside as other people are.
I'm more of a Franz guy. I think when you say, yeah, he's not going to be a star, but he's a 6'10" guy who can guard 2 or 3 positions, who's got a lot of positive shooting kind of indicators, and is a very smart player. Like that kind of player is really valuable, even if he's not a quote unquote star. And I think like KOC was saying, you've already got 2 quote unquote stars in Halliburton and Fox. That's totally okay to grab Wagner at 9.
Up next, we have the New Orleans Pelicans with the 10th pick. Kyle, you are on the clock.
Well, the name of the game is we got to keep Zion happy. We need to continue to supplement this like giant planetary force that we have in the middle of our team. And to do that, you got to do that by adding size and playmaking and shooting as much of it as you possibly can. To me, I'm going to go with Moses Moody at 10 from Arkansas. Moody is 6'6", 200 pounds, big hands. He averaged 16.8 points per game this past season, 81.2 from the line, 35.8 from 3. Shoots an easy ball, shoots with movement pretty well, savvy player. I think that his switchability in the future as a defender is going to be pretty good. I just like him as a guy that is going to be pretty dependable. I just think that the shooting upside is high with him, and I think that's important for Zion because they just need to add as much of that as they possibly can.
Tjarks, you were a guy who really liked Mikal Bridges coming out of Villanova, and we're seeing him thrive now in the playoffs for the Suns. How does Moody and Bridges compare and contrast? Because those guys get compared to each other quite often. For Moody, is that the path moving forward? A Mikal Bridges style role?
I mean, that's the hope. I just think Moody is way less athletic than Mikal Bridges. So I think his value is more on the offensive end as a pure shooter. To me, he's kind of more like a Wes Matthews type, where he's got a big, strong frame. He's a tough guy. But in terms of like being able to go out and guard Paul George, I don't want to see it happening for him. Like Mikal Bridges is a whole different level athlete than Moody, in my opinion.
Tjarks, you have the next pick with the Charlotte Hornets at number 11.
Okay, so this is my pick. This is my guy. This is a very selfish pick. I'm picking Kai Jones from Texas, and this is where I wanted to go. I think you get Kai Jones with LaMelo Ball and Miles Bridges. I think Kai's got the guy. He's the guy in this range who could have a chance to be a star one day. He's the center of the future for Charlotte. They can play fast with him. He's a pretty skilled player. And then really anyone with LaMelo is going to be better than what they are otherwise. So like if you're a fan of a certain player, get him to 11 playing with LaMelo. It's going to be great for him. I think this is the pick for Charlotte that really elevates their ceiling.
Well, the big problem is, him potentially playing over Nick Richards, which I just don't see.
Now that is a deep cut, Kyle.
I'm obviously kidding.
Even the green room folks don't know that you're even talking about.
I should have just left that out there. Yeah, for sure. With Kai, I mean, I'm not as sold as Tjarks is, but he's right about, LaMelo is that type of playmaking talent. If you can run, jump, catch, we've seen this with Luka, same kind of thing. He makes rim runners look better. I think that he elevates players like that. So if he was going to reach his potential, playing with that level of a playmaker would be ideal, honestly.
Why are you not as high on him as Tjarks, Kyle? What is it about Kai Jones' game? What's the downside?
I just don't see it as. I don't see those factors playing out, swinging up the same way. When I watch him, I just don't see things popping in terms of like ball skills upside that I think some other people were seeing. I'm not as totally sure about him as like a defensive anchor either. To me, I see him as sort of like a later rotation guy that comes in. I don't know that I saw anybody in the playoffs that gave me confidence for him fitting that type of a template. That's just kind of at the surface, my feeling on him.
So moving on to number 12 with the San Antonio Spurs, I'm picking Josh Giddey out of Australia with a selection. 18-year-old who played last season in the NBL, 6'8" playmaker, high basketball IQ, can manipulate defenses, makes every pass in the book, shoots only 31% from three. That needs to improve, but I like getting him into San Antonio, work with their shooting coach, and maybe improve that. I'd be giddy if the Spurs were to get Giddey. I had to say it. I had to do it, especially with their history of improving young players. So I'd love the fit for Giddey in San Antonio. I like him next to their younger guards, Derek White, DeJounte Murray, a lot of young players there. And I think Giddey would add some size. And Kyle, to borrow one of your lines, let me know if you agree.
Oh, well, I mean, what you said, how dare you, number one. Also, to me, I'm just kind of getting in this territory with like Leandro Bolmaro. Are we sure? Like, there's a lot of alluring things. Like he's big. He can access some of those like skip pass over the top passing lane type things. Passes in traffic well. Buying the shot is the swing thing here because if he can't shoot the ball, I mean he almost has like somebody you'd see in pickup. Like seriously, he has like that kind of shot mechanics when I watch him. I'm not filled with confidence. I don't know, Tjarks, if you are or not.
I think if you're San Antonio at 12, you've got to swing for the fences here. You've made a lot of solid picks over the years. You have a lot of solid young players. But if you don't ever get a star at some point, you're going to be stuck here forever at 11, 12, 13. So I buy the logic of going for the higher upside guy here for the Spurs.
Kyle, you're up next at number 13 with the Indiana Pacers.
Again, we're going with conventional kind of what we predict. I don't even think that the Pacers are going to take this. I don't know that there's any kind of immediate play here that's going to work for them. I think you just kind of go with defensive perimeter depth here, and Keon Johnson is the pick from Tennessee. Guy that has I think he has higher defensive upside, honestly. I mean, he's had sort of off the bounce issues. He's about 6'4", a great athlete, a big finisher. Yeah, I'm going to go with Keon Johnson from Tennessee.
Do you see that rumor about maybe they're going for Eric Gordon into the Rockets at 13? That really intrigued me when I saw that as like a possible trade or something.
It's getting the developed version of the guy in a way. I mean, different types of players, but if you want a hard-nosed defensive player who can hit some shots for you, that's what you would hope Keon Johnson turns into. Granted, there's some, dramatic differences in their games, but I like the idea of that, Tjarks. And you're up next at number 14 with the Golden State Warriors. They took Davion Mitchell with the 7th pick. Up here at 14, their second first rounder. Who you got, Tjarks?
So I am taking Zaire Williams at Stanford. It's a bit of a risk. He had a pretty bad freshman season. My thought is with these 2 picks, they're going to take one guy who can compete now, but realistically, they're not going to play 2 rookies and James Wiseman next year. So that second pick, whether it's 7 or 14, will be more, I would think, will be more of a gamble, more of a high ups guy they can develop for a year or 2 in the G League. And I think Zaire, he is that big wing they need. He's a legit 6'8". He can shoot the ball pretty well. Everything else has to come in time. I think if you're Golden State, if you already drafted a win now guy at 7, you draft a guy who fits long term in Zaire at 14.
Kyle, if I didn't know anything about the draft and I'm reading a Zaire Williams profile, I'm seeing, 6'7", he can create off the dribble, the flashes of offense, the highlights are ridiculous. Why isn't he a top 10 pick, Kyle?
I actually think I'm the conductor of the Zaire Williams train. I've been saying it for months. This is a guy that I've liked from moment one. When I saw him in person, I was like, that guy is going to be an NBA wing. He has we were talking about the difference between Moody and like Bridges. Zaire definitely has the body type to be that type of like Swiss Army knife. He's long. He's competitive as hell. He actually measured at 6'9 3/4. He's almost 6'10". He's like he has a 6'10 and a quarter wingspan. The big question too is he's a little more Reddishy. Like he's a little Reddishy in the fact I believe in the catch and shoot with Zaire. He has similar problems that Reddish and Bridges have, which is off the bounce. You get into their shoulders, you get into their torso. Their ball control is not as steady. Things like that. Those are the questions for him going forward. But I think he can catch and shoot. Multi-purpose defender. He's a playoff level wing, in my opinion. I think we're going to see him there. I really do. That's my prediction.
Up next at number 15, I'm drafting for the Washington Wizards. I have to admit, I was a little bit disappointed not to get the opportunity to select Zaire Williams with this pick. I would have liked to add that type of wing to a roster with Bradley Beal. But with that said, I'm going to go with Alperen Şengün, a Turkish big man, 6'10", 240 pounds. We made a whole video breaking down his game for The Void a couple weeks back, which you can check out on the Ringers YouTube page. He's got a throwback style with his post game, but I think he's shown enough to me off the dribble with some of the step back jumpers he's had, with some of the spot up threes, with the touch from the line, the touch inside. I feel a high level of confidence that Şengün's going to have the ability to stretch his range out and become a guy who can be dynamic of the offensive end of the floor. Adding in his passing ability, to me, he's the type of guy where if you keep Bradley Beal long-term in Washington, those guys can excel with each other. A lot of dribble handoff actions with Bradley Beal and Şengün. And if you end up having to blow it up and trade Beal for either young players or draft picks or whatever, Şengün's a nice guy to have. The question with him is going to be what level does he reach defensively? But I like Şengün at this point in the draft and believe he should be, maybe a lottery pick, probably a top 10, maybe even a top 10 pick, but definitely lottery. So I like Şengün at 15.
Yeah, the stats guys have him as a top 5 pick in terms of his statistics. His statistics are outrageous.
Yeah, people like him. I think that you hit on it. Is he going to be? They have an interesting collection of bigs. It's in flux. I think you just take the player that could potentially be a centerpiece, like an offensive piece that are hard to get, like a fulcrum creator with 2 shooters, like we talk about a lot. That's assuming that Beal and Westbrook are there, but I mean, yeah, it makes sense, especially here. I wasn't sure about him like top 5, but here I think it's a good idea.
Kyle, you're up next with the Oklahoma City Thunder at number 16.
Yeah, well, I've been teased for this, but I liked this guy before he even came to Kentucky, and I was very pleased that he came. I'm going to go with Isaiah Jackson from Kentucky for OKC here. Isaiah Jackson is He's same kind of thing. We talked before about like these springy fours that you're not so sure about him playing five, being an anchor. He's like a high energy Nerlens type, very talented rim protector. Like his block percentages were up there in the rarefied air of like Anthony Davis, Nerlens Noel, disruptive. I think he's talented, ambidextrous. I think there's a future with like a Chris Boucher type thing where he could be like a catch and shoot. Like he's not going to be taking them at volume or moving, but I think that there's like very light shooting upside with Jackson. He's an interesting player in my opinion.
Tjarks, how surprised are you that Kyle went with a Kentucky prospect?
All right, piss off.
It's
number
stunning. Just wait till he starts reaching for guys later in this draft. The more
with the next pick, I'm going to take Quade Green.
Don't worry, Big Blue Nation. We'll see more Kentucky guys in this draft thanks to Kyle.
Tjarks, you're up next with number 17 in the Memphis Grizzlies.
So I was thinking for the Grizzlies, they're a very analytically inclined organization. So I'm thinking, okay, so what's a guard who's got good steal rates, good block rates, good free throw percentage, is young for his age, the kind of classic analytic checkpoints. And that leads me to Jaden Springer from Tennessee. I think the question with him is his jump shot, but Memphis has a history of drafting guys who don't shoot a ton of threes, but can play in that mid-range a lot. So to me, this kind of fits their style of play as Springer.
Is finding another ball handler next to Ja Morant the priority, Tjarks?
I think he can guard, though. Finding more guys who can play perimeter defense next to him is kind of important.
With the next pick at number 18 for Oklahoma City, I'm taking another guard here, Sharif Cooper out of Auburn. I drafted Scotty Barnes to OKC at number 6. Kyle took Isaiah Jackson, his Kentucky guy, at number 16. Adding a guard. Kyle shaking his head. I'm going with Cooper out of Auburn here. He's a first-round pick because of his ability to command the offense. This guy has feel and intelligence and vision beyond his years. Excellent playmaking ability. And then the draft guide, I compare him to Rajon Rondo. That's one of the comparisons we have for him. But I do think at 19 years old, as an 80% free throw shooter with good touch on floaters and layups inside, right now he looks very uncomfortable as a shooter. There needs to be mechanical changes. But I have a high level of belief in his ability to do that because of the touch. And I like what the fit could be long-term with Oklahoma City, with Gilgeous-Alexander in the backcourt, with Cooper. I mean, I don't know if OKC can do any wrong here with 3 first-round draft picks. I'm excited to see if they package those together, possibly to trade up for a guy. But if they do keep them all, if you can come out of this with Cooper and Jackson and Barnes, I love that haul for Oklahoma City. Do you guys like what we did here with the Thunder?
I would say you probably shouldn't draft 3 non-shooters together if you're going to try 3 young guys. Like you got to at least maybe have 1 non-shooter, but that is very OKC to just say, we don't need shooting. Just draft the best athlete. Should
I have taken a shooter here, Kyle? Did we make a mistake of these last 2 picks at 16 and 18 taking theoretical shooters?
I'm not. You in general are just an optimist, KOC, which is on brand. I'm
a realist. I'm a realist. I lean towards optimism, but I'm definitely a realist.
Yeah, I mean, you bust my chops for picking players in Kentucky, and I'm just going to fight you with kindness and just say, you know what, you're an optimist, and I appreciate that about you. I think Sharif Cooper is the biggest playmaking talent in the draft. I think he differs a little bit from Rondo in that Rondo could compensate with like athleticism and wingspan and things like that. He's not the same rack attack type player, but the shooting challenges are similar. I mean, and I think that these 2 picks here kind of go together because I was mad at you because you stole him from me because I think that at 21 that's or wait, no, I have it backwards. At 19, I thought that the Knicks Sharif Cooper would be great in New York, I think.
He would have been.
He would have been.
I'm sorry. You could trade up. You have 19 and 21. You could trade up, but we're not doing trades in this. Maybe we will see the Knicks do that on draft night.
Interesting leverage that they could have there if they know that they want Sharif Cooper. But I do think he's the biggest talent, playmaking talent. But since he's not there, I'm going to go with Chris Duarte from Oregon.
Love it.
Duarte is he's an older player. That's something that you're going to hear people talk about. He's a wing that can give you some reps as a pick and roll player. He was a terrific pick and roll and spot up and transition shooter at Oregon this year. He was a 44.4% jump shooter off the bounce. But he's 24 years old. I think that he's going to be able to play immediately. And at this spot that I think it makes sense because based on what we've seen in the playoffs, he's the type of player that would work. He's also a dad. I just wanted to throw that out there, Tjarks. I know we like
Love it.
we like dads.
Well, he's so old, he should be probably.
Yeah. Makes
24 years old, Duarte. He's one of those guys, you're drafting him to come in right away and make an impact. Tjarks, is this a draft with a lot of those types of guys that can come in right away and contribute to a team?
Yeah, I think in this range of the draft, it's one or the other. I mean, I guess that's kind of obvious, but when you're at the 20s, it's like either you're taking a gamble on a guy with a lot more upside who could not even play right away, or you're going for a guy who can give you that instant impact. And Duarte is definitely that. There's not really a hole in his game. He can play tomorrow and not have like a glaring report in the scouting report. It says, don't guard his shot. He can't guard anyone. He can't dribble. He's a very well-rounded player, which means he should be able to play right away for the Knicks, which is important for Tibbs, obviously.
Drafting between these two Knicks picks at 19 and 21 is the Atlanta Hawks. They, of course, made their run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Tjarks, who's your pick here to bolster this team around Trae Young?
See, my thought with the Hawks is they're going to take a gamble. They're a really well-run organization. They scout pretty well. And I think Josh Christopher at Arizona State, he's not gotten a ton of talk in the pre-draft process because he had a very erratic freshman year, but the talent is obvious. There's a 6'5", 6'6" guy with a great athletic ability who can shoot it, good length. He's really got a chance to be their like long-term sixth man bucket getter off the bench. I think he's got a lot of talent. Whether it happens or not, who knows? But disappointing draft for us, go for the most talented player. I think that's him.
I like that pick you have there, Tjarks. Moving on to the next Knicks pick at number 21. I'm going with the player everybody's wondering right now. How's he falling? How's he falling? That's Corey Kispert out of Gonzaga. Similar mindset here with the selection that you had at number 19, Kyle, with Duarte. Could potentially be like a 50, 40, 90 player because of his shooting ability. This guy can just light it up from outside, can come off screens for you, hand off, spot up, high IQ player with his relocation off the ball. There's a lot to like. But the skeptics of Kispert look at, well, what else does he bring? What can he do for you off the dribble? What can he bring for you on the defensive end of the floor? These are legitimate concerns that teams around the league have. So I think there's a real chance. There's a real chance that Kispert is one of those guys that could fall on draft night. But Tjarks, is that a fair thing? Like, should he fall on draft night? What's your evaluation of Kispert?
I like his value a lot more here at 21 than I like 11 or 10, which is where he was being mocked for a while. I think, yeah, he's a fairly one-dimensional shooter. We all know that guy has a lot of value in the league now, but I think earlier in the draft, you have to go for a higher upside, more complete player. So to me, it makes perfect sense that he'd go at 21.
Do you agree with that, Kyle?
I do. Yeah. Exact same thing. I was not with the mocking him in the 10 range. He's just too specific a use, like a type of use player. Like I think that he's the type of guy that you could run off ball action with your primary offense the way teams do today. And he's such a threat that you have to respect him. Maybe you put him in those 3-man kind of pick and roll situations. I like him on that front because I think he's a volume movement shooter, and we've seen that those work, and they can work in the playoffs.
Kyle, you have the next pick with the Los Angeles Lakers, trying to reload here, make a playoff run again next season. Who you got?
I went with same kind of deal here, shooting and it's a little bit of playmaking here as well. I went with Jared Butler from Baylor. He was a 41.6% shooter from 3 this year on 6.2 attempts. He's used to playing in multiple guard lineups. Now, do I think that he's like a starting point guard in the NBA? Not necessarily, but I do think that he's a person that can give you offense in your rotation, and he's fluid. And I think his upside in terms of as an initiator is strong too. So, I mean, there's a world where Butler could end up being better than Davion Mitchell, in my opinion.
He was seen as a better player coming into the season for most of like the first few months. It was Butler, and then Mitchell kind of came on late, closer to the tournament. So that is true.
It's worth noting that Butler was held out of the NBA Combine with a pre-existing heart condition. We do have him going here in the first round, but it's unclear if that'll be the case come draft night. But no denying his skills on the floor. And Kyle, I love the pick here. I love what he could potentially bring to the Lakers. I mean, they needed a spark. There were so many times this season it felt like the team needed a spark. And Butler's one of those guys with his shooting and playmaking that he could bring that, I think, as a rookie one of those guys who can come in and play right away. So I'm a big fan of that. These next two picks are the Houston Rockets at 23. Tjarks, you're up, and then I have the 24th pick with them right after that. Two picks here for the Rockets, a team that isn't thinking about making the playoffs or going for a championship right now. Who do you got at 23, Tjarks?
So I've got a guy we've got falling as Jalen Johnson from Duke.
Another one.
I think I've not seen him fall this far in any mocks. He's obviously very talented. He's a freaking huge wing, elite athlete. He's kind of got some Ben Simmons in his game, and that the question about him is his jump shot, and just he also quit on Duke this year. Essentially, that didn't help his stock. I just think at 23, the talent's so obvious, you just go for it. If you're Houston, especially, you have so many picks, doesn't even matter. So I think at that point, I have a lot of issues with Jalen Johnson as a top 10 pick, but at 23, you just got to go for it and see what happens.
Kyle, this is no doubt better value for Jalen Johnson at this point in the draft. Kyle mentioned the name Ben Simmons. They, of course, passed on the opportunity to trade James Harden for Ben Simmons, instead taking the draft picks based package from the Brooklyn Nets. For Houston here, is Jalen Johnson a potential discount Ben Simmons, or does he have different layers to his game that stray from that comparison that is so often attached to him?
I think that it's interesting that the Ben Simmons dialogue is where it is right now, that it's coming to a pitch, like a fever pitch right now, because at the same time that Jalen is coming into the league. Now, Jalen is a guy that I used to have very high on my board. I thought he was a top 5 guy. Really liked him a lot in the class. Him and Cade were actually my two favorites. I think that he conditionally is not his fit is more conditional than a lot of the other guys that are considered near the top of this draft. And I think we saw that. The ball skills are great for his size. Defensively, he has a long way to go. I just think the shooting, I'm just not sure about at all. I like him in transition as a creator. It's kind of similar. It's kind of similar to Ben Simmons, honestly.
So with the 24th pick, I'm taking Trey Mann, a sophomore out of Florida, 6'3", 178 pounds. He grew an inch after his freshman year, put on 15 pounds. At 178, obviously still needs to add a lot more weight to his frame. Not a great athlete, but at this point in the draft, I feel comfortable taking a guy who gets by with feel as a playmaker, as a shooter. I like what we've done here with the Rockets, with Mobley at 2, high upside with Johnson at number 3. And then, maybe a little bit more certainty with a high IQ, feel guy and Trey Mann at 24, besides you sharing a last name with him, Kyle. How do you feel about what did here for the Rockets? Yeah.
Cousin Trey?
Yeah, this year I was finally ready to concede that he's a better shooter than me. Finally, I let him have that. No, I think that Trey fits the mold of the types of players that are helping good teams get better.
Yes.
Because he's injecting competent kind of scoring mentality. It's just scoring. That's what I have in my notes for him. A little bit bigger than you would think. I think he's sort of in that tradition of Jordan Clark. I think he could end up, well, I don't know about that, but I mean, he's in that Reggie Jackson kind of wheelhouse too, of a guy that can just come in and just give you buckets, be another guy that you have to worry about. He has some of the best off the dribble shake in the draft, in my opinion.
Moving on to number 25 with the Los Angeles Clippers. Kyle, you're up.
At 25, I think that the Clippers should take Usman Garuba from Real Madrid. Garuba is defensively really savvy. He has a big wingspan. I just had that pulled up. He's physically sort of in a similar mold to Isaiah Stewart in the fact that he can play above his size a little bit. He's a really good interior passer too. I think that it's going to help. It could help he's a guy that's going to be able to play quickly too, in my opinion. In the ways that Zubac was targeted in these past playoffs, I don't think that it's going to be as easy. Depending on if they get Serge back, I think that could be a nice two-headed monster too. I think Garuba could be a nice small ball 5.
So Garuba sounds like a guy who could help the Clippers possibly as a rookie. At number 26, the Denver Nuggets are another team that could be seeking help right away. Tjarks, you have the Nuggets pick. Who do you got for them?
So I'm going to throw a wild card in here. A guy I really like, hasn't been talked about a ton in this draft, is Isaiah Todd from the G League Ignite team. So everyone talks about Kuminga and Green, but they weren't the only prospects on the Ignite team. I think Todd kind of got lost in the shuffle a bit. He's legit 6'10". He can move really well. He's got a great looking shot. I mean, he definitely has some holes in his game. He's not the most self-aware player. He kind of forced a lot of shots. But I think if you're Denver, you already have a pretty full rotation. They have a long history now of drafting kind of elite high school players who've fallen a bit, from Michael Porter to Bol to RJ Hampton. I think at 26, you take a gamble on a guy with Todd's talent and hope for the best.
So Todd, he can finish inside at 6'10". He can shoot it. He can ISO a bit, face up. Why is he not a lottery pick, Kyle?
Because this has been sort of an interesting evolution where I had this idea of like that he's being undervalued from talking to people. The knock on him over and over again that you hear is that he just doesn't know how to play yet. I'm okay with that here. I mean, I also think that if he had played at Michigan for a year, I think we maybe would be talking about him differently, because if you watch the Ignite games, like Tjarks said, it can create the illusion that he doesn't know what's going on. He would go out there. He's not the type of guy who's just like, I'm going to set screens, make, simple passes. His value is as a shooter. And for him to be that size and that athletic, he even has some back to the basket game. I mean, I was seeing him shoot some like one-legged Dirk fallaways and stuff that looked great. I just think his scoring upside is high. I think that at this play, this is on brand for the Nuggets to take a player like this, even though he is kind of similar to Michael Porter Jr. a little bit. I don't know how that would all shake out. They're gonna be able to play a full lineup of 6'10" guys at some point, so that's pretty fun.
I would love to see that. I love the Todd pick here for Denver. It wouldn't shock me if there's a team in the top 20. And I'm not reporting anything here. I don't know, but it wouldn't shock me if there's at least one team in the top 20 who loves Isaiah Todd. It just takes him and surprises everybody on draft night. So we'll see what happens for real, but I do like the pick here in the late first round, Tjarks. So up next at number 27, I'm drafting for the Brooklyn Nets. And I'm thinking here, who can help me right away? We got to get back into the playoffs and win a championship. Who complements our stars? And to me, the pick is obvious. It's Trey Murphy, 6'8", 7-foot forward out of Virginia. Hit 40% of his threes in college, 82% of his free throws. This dude is smart. He's an intelligent player. He has a feel on offense. And with a team like Brooklyn, we saw how creative they got with Bruce Brown as a screener, using him as essentially a center on offense, how they utilized Jeff Green. I would get really, really stoked to see Murphy on a roster like this with stars, because you could use him with his size as a screener. You could use him in pick and pops, pick and rolls. You can use him off ball as a shooter. And on defense, this guy's versatile. He's smart. He's aware. I have him ranked near the lottery. It wouldn't shock me one bit if he does rise up the boards here. And Tjarks, it seems like he is a name that is rising here. Do you think there's a chance that he does go lottery and that a team like Brooklyn or even Denver doesn't even have an opportunity to select him?
Yeah, I think this is probably too low for him, just from talking to people. It's really funny because all season, no one talked about Murphy. Like 2 months ago, this would be like, oh, wow, it's a pretty high spot for Trey Murphy. But this is probably when the biggest riser in the pre-draft process is. Like what you said, KOC, when you have an elite shooter who can survive on defense, that is just so valuable the way the league is now. Like late lottery wouldn't stun me at all. Like I look at him, I'd take him over Corey Kispert probably, because I feel like he has a higher defensive upside. And I think you kind of saw like what everyone's talking about is Cam Johnson, right? Cam Johnson a couple of years ago in 11, that was seen as a crazy pick. And now it's like, well, he's 6'9", he can shoot and he moves pretty well. Obviously, he's a top 15 pick.
Kyle, you're up next with the Philadelphia 76ers. Who do you got?
Okay, everybody.
Who do you got, Kyle?
Shock
wait, the world with this pick.
No. All right. So let me just explain. I don't feel like typical, like this was such a weird year that I promise I wasn't thinking this way. But I think in terms of this player's where this team is, what their needs are, I don't think that they're going to get somebody that I think that they're going to address their needs in other areas. I think that BJ Boston, I'm stammering like I'm worried. I'm confident about this. BJ Boston is who I think the Sixers should take here because
where did he play this year?
Where does he go to school, Kyle?
Somewhere in the East. I didn't see it. I don't have it in my notes here. He went to Kentucky. He's a Kentucky player. No, I think that at this spot for a good team, there were enough bizarre variables with BJ Boston this year that I think that his upside and his talent, it's worth it. Now, he's a long way away. I think this is a guy that you can put on ice that has high scoring upside. He's big. I mean, he's 6'8", and he has a great wingspan. He's bendy. I think that for the Sixers, I think this would make sense. If you can get a player with upside like this at this spot, why not?
Kyle, I'm curious. No, I don't disagree here, but what is the
They
logic?
probably won't do it. They probably won't do it.
Well, what is the logic behind drafting a high upside player with the 28th pick versus somebody who maybe can get into your rotation right away and help this team compete for a championship? Because I get what you're doing. I'm curious, like, what is the logic behind that, behind this pick here?
Because I don't think I think that they can address their needs in other areas. That's what I'm saying. I think if you have a chance in the draft, if you are already a pretty good team and you're close, I think that, I mean, there's obviously going to be movement on their roster. I just think if you can, in this kind of a transitional phase for their roster construction, if you can nab a guy who could eventually evolve into a piece like this, because, I mean, honestly, he's been high throughout his career. I mean, he's a big wing with a lot of like versatility as a scorer. I think if he'd had a little bit better year, and I think that this year was a little misleading for his draft stock. It was kind of up and down in terms of his confidence. I think he could turn into a good dribble shooter, and eventually a decent defender. So yeah, I mean, that's my thinking. You get a good player like this, put him on ice, and he could be something here soon.
ESPN had him at number 3 before the season started. This is a guy who was viewed so highly before the year. So at some point, someone's gonna take the chance on him just in the talent.
Exactly. That's it.
At number 29, the Phoenix Suns. Tjarks, this is your last pick of the first round.
Okay, I'm gonna take another guy who's really risen in the pre-draft process. That's Josh Primo from Alabama. I think it's pretty clear somebody promised him. He was a guy who was kind of seen as a second round pick. He's super young. I think he's still 18. 6'5", 6'6" shooting guard, pretty good looking shot, had a very small role in college. I think he surprised a lot of folks when he declared, but he had a strong combine. I think he kind of makes sense as a long-term wing in Phoenix. It's definitely a gamble, but at 29, I think it makes sense to take him. I think he's got a lot of talent. To me, he's about as talented as Moses Moody. We'll see how it works out for him, but I think it makes sense at 29 as a value pick for Josh Primo.
Can I ask you a question? Quick
Sure.
question. Does he have a little bit of Karis LeVert energy, Josh Primo? What do you think? If you think about where they started and where they ended up, because he comes to mind when I think about Josh Primo. Great name, by the way.
I think it's a lot of projection because we just didn't see him in a primary role at Alabama. He was probably like literally the 5th option on that team. So you're really going off very small flashes of things he could do in a bigger role somewhere else.
The comparisons in the NBA draft guide for Primo, Kyle, are Karis LeVert.
Booyah.
And
Kyle's
Anthony
doing his
Simons.
homework.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah, I like those. So moving on to the 30th pick with the Utah Jazz, I'm taking JT Thor here. Auburn freshman, my second Auburn pick of this mock draft. 18 years old, 6'9", 7'3" wingspan, very raw, but the displays of defensive versatility would fit in nicely with Utah here, which is why I asked you, Kyle, about the rawness. What's the mindset between taking a raw player versus a guy who can help right away? I think with JT Thor, maybe as a rookie, he's not playing a ton for you. Maybe by the end of the year, you can grow him into a guy who can play with Gobert because he can space the floor a little bit. He can defend on the perimeter. Or if Gobert is off the floor or in a playoff series where you can't have Gobert out there for whatever reason it might be, JT Thor is the type of guy that can allow you to play with some smaller switchable lineups. So for the Jazz here, whether it's Thor or somebody else, I'm taking a guy who can help me accomplish that. Where are you guys at on JT Thor? He's one of the more interesting prospects in the draft. A lot of people love him. A lot of people hate him. What do you think about JT Thor?
I mean, I think the talent is clear. He's a 6'10" guy who can shoot and move, and that alone gets you a first-round contract somewhere. And I think worth pointing out, we're talking a lot about kind of fit, upside versus instant impact. But at a certain point, you just take the best player. You look at last year's draft, Utah took Azubuike, a big old center who couldn't help them at all. The guy right behind him was Jaden McDaniels, a quote-unquote toolsy, raw player. But actually, he'd be the perfect player for Utah right now because he's a 6'10" wing guard on the perimeter. So I think you do have to identify the skill set and say, we're going to develop this raw player over the course of the season.
Well, that wraps up the first round. But before we go, I do have a quick question for the both of you. Kyle, you take this first. Who's the top rated prospect left on your board entering the second round here, is there a guy that should have went first round that didn't in our mock exercise?
I don't have like a glaring one. I have a few. I won't do it. I mean, Rocco. We were talking about how to say this. Rocco Perkisson. Is that? Am I saying it or Perkasson?
Rocco Pekicin, I believe.
Yeah, I haven't said
Rocco
it.
Pekicin.
Said it out loud a whole lot.
Big fan of him.
Yes,
fan.
I think that he's one of those people that probably just got. We talk about people falling. Sometimes you just get through picks and it's like guys just kind of get squeezed down. It's not necessarily like you're ranking them at a certain spot. I could see him being a rotation NBA player in the future.
Yeah, I mean, he can handle. He flashes some scoring ability off the bounce. He can post up. He can pass. Like so many players, he needs to improve dramatically as an athlete on the defensive end of the floor. But I love what he brings offensively, and I'll likely have him ranked in my top 20 whenever the big board gets updated. How about you, Tjarks? Who do you got?
My guy is Bones Highland from VCU.
Ooh,
I think this is a guy I think has got real Emmanuel Quickly potential. He's 6'3". He's got legit like 30, 35 foot shooting range. He's the rare shooter who's really fast, which I'm a big fan of. I mean, he's undersized, not a point guard. But I could see Highland on the right team in the 20s being an instant impact player right away. It could make a team a lot better.
One other guy in addition to Rocco Pekovic is Cameron Thomas, a guard/wing out of LSU. This dude can get buckets off your bench. I'd love him on a team like the Sixers, have him bring a spark. I love Thomas. I'm a little bit surprised we didn't have him going in the first round, but he is the type of player wouldn't shock me if we see him drop. Tjarks, with guys like Highland and Pekovic, in even late first round, some of our selections, Murphy, Butler, Kispert fell until 21 in our mock draft. What's your overall assessment, Tjarks, of this draft class? Is this a strong draft? Is this a top-heavy draft? How would you define it compared to some other past seasons?
I mean, I think you have to say top-heavy in that the top four is so good. Like, I'd be shocked if all those top four guys should be 10-year players who start on good teams and are all-stars probably. So to me, like, you got to say top heavy. I think after that, it's very much an eye of the beholder draft where from like 5 to 20 and from like 20 to 45, it's a super wide range. I think this is the kind of draft where like the best drafters make their money, right? Like the guys who've got the eye, who know how to develop talent and fit talent into roles can make a huge impact. I think like if you're OKC, if you're Houston, these teams have multiple picks. If they pick really well, they'll be really accelerated forward, but they could also blow like 2 or 3 picks on guys who can't play. So I think this is going to be a wide range of outcomes after the top four.
Do you see it that way too, Kyle?
Yeah, and I mean, if you just kind of go down through our picks, if you're looking at like Kuminga, Bouknight, Wagner, Kai Jones, Josh Giddey, Keon, it's like there is some potential for downward swing, I think, like in terms of the outcomes. I'm not as like solid. I agree with you all that it is very high. I mean, but that's also every draft. The people who have the best processes in place are gonna have a good advantage. I was gonna say another name I would want to throw in there. I like this guy probably more than other people is Jeremiah Robinson Earl. I think that he's gonna be a quality rotate. He's big, he can shoot, he's a smart player. He's a little heavy footed at times, but I agree. I think that it's a draft that doesn't fill me with like as much confidence even as last year in terms of the role players, but at the very top. I expect those guys to succeed and be good.
I think this is going to be another draft where we see a lot of young players contributing during their rookie contracts. And that could mean big things for certain teams with final hopes. We're seeing that with some of these teams making conference finals runs or NBA finals runs with the Bucks and the Suns with Mikal Bridges out there, Cam Johnson. It's not going to shock me one bit if we see some guys like a Chris Duarte, playing heavy minutes in the postseason. So I like this draft class. I agree it's top heavy. And I think you nailed it, Tjarks, when you said it's an eye of the beholder draft. That means teams can get creative. There's going to be a lot of big boards that are dramatically different across different teams, even within individual organizations. So I can't wait till draft night, July 29th. We'll be doing more on theringer.com with mock drafts, analysis, video breakdowns. I know, Kyle, you're doing one on Jalen Green. I got some other stuff cooking up. We'll be doing a big update on the Ringer's 2021 NBA Draft Guide, which you can find at nbadraft.theringer.com, which has all my profiles. Tjarks, Kyle, this was really, really fun. I enjoyed this, and thank you, everybody, for participating.